We'll go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's session focused on consumer insights. This is brought to you in partnership with the Jefferson Trust, where inspired ideas meet dedicated donors. I'm Eric Hunter. I'm with the Alumni Association and would like to say thank you to each of you for taking the time to be here today, and also a special thank you to our participating alumni. Before I turn it over to our moderator, I just want to go over a quick flow of the events. We'll start with our panel discussion and then move into our Q&A. If you've got questions during the discussion, please drop them in the chat and we'll answer them and ask them at that time. After the Q&A, that'll close out the formal portion of today's session, and then we'll go into informal networking sessions. It will be 3 sessions, 10 minutes each for those that can stay, and it's a great opportunity to network with fellow alumni who are also joining us today. So I'm going to now turn it over to our moderator for today, Angela Lee. She's a double WHO, Engineering 96, Darden 03, and currently head of strategy with Johnson & Johnson. Angela?
All right, thanks so much, Eric. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. We're so excited to be with you. And with that, I'd love to just go ahead and dive in to this very hot topic, very much on our minds, I'm sure. As I think about managing brands and businesses, to me, insights, especially consumer ones, are a key spark. They're very foundational to strategy, and they can be a tremendous asset in fueling sustainable growth. So excited to be here with 3 leaders who each represent very different industries and categories. And during the time that we have together, to be able to dive in and share some of their perspective and experiences, especially with some great examples. So with that, I'd love to just begin and start with a broader question to warm us up. You know, how do companies use data? For what purpose? As we started this prep, we looked at using data internally or externally to improve a customer experience, as well as then even selling of the data. So would love to hear perhaps from David, if you want to get us started on how companies use data, and even with a bit of an example.
Sure thing. Thanks, Angela. I think what you're going to hear from all our panelists here, our mutual panelists, is there's a spectrum of use, right? With probably the least controversial being when a company uses consumer data to better its own product. So it's on behalf of the consumer. It makes the product more relevant, more accurate, more valuable to the consumer. And Netflix is a company that did that. We never sold data. We used the consumer behavior and viewing behavior to actually give you a better recommendation for your next thing that you might want to watch. And generally, people respond favorably to that use of data, right? Where the company is using the data to better its product, to better the value given to the consumer. And I'll hand it off to my panelists for maybe some of the other examples of how companies use data, and as we climb towards maybe a spectrum of a little more controversial or a little bit more self-serving for the company.
Louis,
yeah, sure. I'll jump in with kind of it's a little more, requires a little more, data privacy. And I think, you got to think about what's the win-win for the customer. My company at Cox Communications uses a lot of data for how we interact with our customers. So, we of course, use it some to personalize products, but a lot of it is actually trying to understand, which customers might need different kinds of pricing or billing or product recommendations, what channels they prefer us to interact with, what kind of install experience might they prefer, preferences around even like the kind of content they might respond to when we market to them. So it's a little more, I would say, self-serving in the sense of, we ultimately have an objective that we're trying to get the customer to buy more and engage more with us. But in general, I would say, again, it's mostly consumers are mostly understanding and know, like, we're not still selling the data. or using the data to better that experience with us. But it's more in the interaction space, which you think of like marketing, more kind of customer service, sales experience interactions versus the product itself being, a recommendation engine and kind of how we, deliver the video.
And Pooja?
Yeah, so coming from the media world and the advertising industry, we use it in two ways. The first would be, we get all this data and then we try to really understand through this data, how can we humanize our audience and really have real empathy for them? And also in turn, what media implications arise from the different needs and wants that are expressed in the data. I think also we talked about the range of controversial data. And so one thing we do use is location data to understand where our audiences are and when they're exposed to ads in the real world, like out of home media, for example. And so we see, things with Apple's new software update, how that might affect, now people have more of the opportunity to opt in to tracking and they're more aware. And so we're definitely going to see changes that way. One thing to point out, though, is that there is a primary focus on anonymizing all the data. And so it is a priority to make sure now that people feel that their data is safe and that their identity, they're still managing their own identity.
And I think, Angela, on your behalf, you're probably not allowed to participate as a panelist, but we'll pull out health data, right? Your work at Johnson & Johnson. I think what's difficult in terms of regulating and self-regulating consumer data use is that generally there's always a benefit, to having a little more, right? Pooja talked about geo data or geolocation data, but what if your credit card was trying to prevent fraud and developed analytics and models around your traditional use and realized that you're probably not trying to buy gas in New Jersey right now because you were just in California, right? And so that would be a beneficial use. It's on your behalf and you'd probably be okay with that. And so I think, in terms of companies trying to use consumer data and regulators thinking about where the lines are, it's always a little difficult to try to use a very big hammer on these processes because there's generally a benefit that you're walling off at the same time you're trying to protect consumers.
Yeah, there are a lot of different dimensions for sure in not only how the information is used, what information is used, but ultimately for what purpose. So as we think about, let's say, lots of different aspects of what you guys already spoke to and how it comes to life, perhaps let's go to how, what are some of the key enablers that are needed to make it happen? So in a sense, I've heard the framework, people, process, and systems. But there's a lot of different pieces to, let's say, make the leveraging of data then work, even beginning from what data is tracked and how we do that. Can you speak a little bit more to specific examples of how you then bring that to life? And whoever wants to jump in, Louis?
I say Louis might be the good first one on this one.
Sure, I can start. I'm going to leave identity to Pooja, though. It's an important one, but I think she's probably pretty expert in the identity side of it, which is a critical. I'm just going to talk a little bit about, this day and age, sort of like just all the tools and skill sets you have to have really to solve the diverse kinds of problems have with data. The good side is we can solve things now that we could never solve 20 years ago. Just the whole kind of techniques you would learn and the approach you would take. 90% are almost obsolete from a technique and tool perspective. Now the principles are still very similar and you can still use those, but now you really have to be comfortable with Python. You got to have different cloud services. You're gonna understanding it's not just sort of SQL, but making sure you have access to the right kind of Presto tools or making sure that you have the right, enterprise data warehouse and sort of all the advanced capabilities now they're in the cloud for data warehousing and much more specialized database services than the past. So just sort of fit for purpose. And there's so many different tools that now do automation. So for everything that, you know, somebody might learn the technique to kind of do it yourself, there's going to be some tool that will try to automate that step to make it be more point and click and low code. And so, of course, nobody can learn it all, but I would just say that it really is critical to sort of figure out your tool bench and make sure you're staying up to date. And you really can't, I mean, if you are like, well, I'm just going to like stick with SAS coding, or, you know, you're going to kind of stick with even like one thing, you really can't do that anymore as an organization. I just had one piece to it, is knowing that there's so many different things. At least my team, we no longer look for people who are just generalist data scientists who kind of do a little bit of everything. You have to have some specialization in there. So you either go really deep in data engineering, you know, you go really deep in machine learning models, and even obviously within that, you know, you could specialize in flavors like natural language processing or image recognition. So I think, you know, you do have to think a lot more now, probably also not just about, you're not just in, you know, data analytics, you're in some specific flavor and probably going a little deeper than in the past.
I was going to add to Lewis's point. It's really important to note that this field, it's accelerating so fast in terms of tech and like the data that we're actually able to get. Like we have so much data at our hands, and the way that we can make sure that our jobs won't become obsolete is to make sure that the insights that we have, we can take that and make it into something actionable. So how can we improve the product or media? How can we better serve our customers? Making sure that we can take that data and really apply it and continue to optimize products and features moving forward.
And I think, Angela, in terms of to complete the answer to your question about how do folks approach it, there's different grades, right, based on the company's size, sophistication, resources. And so smaller companies and startup companies, there's lots of outsourcers out there that will do data visualization, you know, basically data science for hire. There's lots of those available, and smaller companies use those. And as you progress and you get larger, like to Lewis's, you know, he's got staff and they're specialists, they're not generalists. But someone does need to, even at the larger companies, you end up having a triumvirate of data science, business application type people that can apply it. And sometimes product engineering is in there as well. And so you've got a kind of a mixture of capabilities of how to apply the insights coming from the data to actual changes in the product, as well as folks that can translate that to a business. In my case, I had financial planning and analysis people that would work side by side with data science folks. They would have the heavy math models, but my folks, you know, the FP&A folks would help apply and say, well, gee, is this going to be, if we invest this much in this area, would this actually be valuable enough to the company?
Thank you. And one of the questions we had received is in this vein, and more specifically among smaller businesses. So, you know, I think there is recognition that data and analytics is critical. But if we take a look at large, you know, or large companies and resourcing, the view of how you go about doing it might look a little bit different. So let's say we have a small business. How would a small business go about implementing some of these strategies?
I mean, I think you'll see a lot of, it's where you see a lot of the kind of like embedded analytics or bots, or they're delivered as part of an application. And so, you know, if you work at Salesforce in analytics, right, you're kind of helping to create some of those as products. And then, you know, you're a small business, you're going to get your analytics from, you know, from using Salesforce or using MailChimp or, you know, using some other application, and then they're embedding it into their workflows. And so I'd say a lot of it, and of course, you know, I mean, even tools like Excel, right, or, you know, enabling more analytics, or you're using tools like Tableau, which are becoming more mainstream. You know, I think if it, you know, smaller business, they're still using data and analytics, But sometimes it has to be wrapped around some service or application layer. So, you don't have full-time data scientists on your team, but you can use a tool that's been created by a data scientist and get a lot of the benefits. And then what's interesting though is a challenge, like it's kind of like a prosumer concept where, like you used to have video equipment that was very specialized, to high end, and then you had kind of consumer, but over time the consumer stuff gets so good, you start creeping into the professional grade, right? We saw the same thing with servers, Sun Microsystems basically goes away at some point because the specialization really became less and less relevant as the sort of mainstream computers got stronger and stronger. I think you'll see the same thing in analytics, right? Like we have to up our game if we're going to be specialized analytics. If we're not better than a bot that's part of a tool, that small and medium business analytics that's embedded in is going to get better and better and smarter and smarter. And so you have to understand how to work in that ecosystem. And I think it's actually, it's really critical to understand that space. You can't really ignore it, just say, oh, I'm doing this high-end custom programming, and then, come to find out that, look, this bot is basically able to do that same thing, and it's just point and click.
Well, and to riff off of that and to bring Pooja in, right? For a small business trying to get known in an area to advertise, right? A lot of negative sentiment has been ascribed to advertising, but basically when you need to market your small business, what better way than to lean on an advertising agency's analytics capability, or Facebook or Google in this sense, right? This is why Facebook has been so successful, is because they bring huge analytic capability down to the individual small business owner, right? In terms of trying to get word out about their business. And so Pooja, how do you, for small business, that is what an agency can provide, right? In terms of their data analytics capability.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think not only do we have an insights team, we have a strategy, we have a data science team on deck that clients, especially, clients that don't necessarily have a huge budget for advertising, can tap into and utilize to really optimize what they can do. So I think it's becoming more and more democratized, especially with the tools that are available on the internet, even for free for companies to use. More and more now we can see like small businesses take a hold of that and really be able to shape the way that they're using their data.
And Angela, if I could pull one of the questions from the text or the chat feed, mainly for Pooja, from Ken and Lolly, much of what is described here can be done without tracking the individual. When I'm identified, I presume it's to target me specifically to the company's advantage, not mine. Pooja, do you agree with that statement, that mostly when it's down to the individual, it's because the company benefit?
Yeah, I mean, it's a two-way street, really. I think it can be looked at both ways. It's some consumers feel, I don't want to be tracked at all. I don't want this. On the other hand, some people feel, well, I want a customized experience. I want to see ads and products that are relevant to me to purchase. And so I think in that way, it does become, you can look at it in multiple sides. I think another interesting thing to note is more companies are now relying on first-party data and less on cookies. And so we're seeing this move, especially with recent environment updates. And so we're pushing out surveys to people. We now have people who want to fill out a survey, and so they know that they're actually giving their honest opinions, and that they know that they're being tracked. And then a lot of times they're being compensated for it, whether it's through a small monetary compensation, what have you. And so I definitely think the industry will see more first-party data as a result.
I think there's one practical use of that kind of matching that maybe sometimes gets glossed over is that, like, if I want to reach out to customers, it could be a prospective customer I don't have a relationship with, or it could be a customer I actually do have a relationship with. But if I want to go to a platform like Facebook to talk to my customers, right? I have ways of talking to my customer, but I can't always reach them through email. Like, a lot of customers don't respond to email, or maybe, SMS is too intrusive. But, I need to, we just launched a big program that the government is funding for lower income consumers, so they get subsidies for internet. And we need to reach our customers and let them know we've got $50 a month for you. The government's willing give, but we can't reach them on Facebook unless we can give Facebook a list of our customers and have Facebook match up specific customers and let us talk to them. And those are customers we already have a relationship with. I think there's an expectation that we have permission, to talk to those customers, but we just can't reach them unless we can do some sort of actual, specific customer matching. I don't want to look alike of my customer. I want to talk to my, actual customers. So I think that's a very practical place where, there is a win-win on both sides. Because, you don't want me to talk to you. A lot of times people say, well, why are you giving me communications for people who aren't, Cox customers? I am your customer, right? And so if you see those ads on Facebook, you'd be like, that's kind of annoying. It's just not relevant for me. I'm already a Cox customer.
I think so. And if I can offer, not to fence with Ken and Lolly who asked the question, but there are applications where individual identification are beneficial to that individual, right? Health data. I know, Angela, we can pull you in as a panelist here, but as long as you opt in, you want to be individualized as a health data person, right? If you have a specific malady or a specific, let's say you have a chronic disease, that you're okay being monitored, right? It's on your behalf in terms of being monitored. That's an example where individual data is beneficial to the individual. Again, I used a fraud example. If you're using your credit card, and your company identifies an anomalous behavior on your behalf, that's to your benefit. It could be health tracking of a senior, in terms of you have the evolution of a medical bracelet, like a MedAlert bracelet. That's hugely beneficial to a loved one, right? As long as you're okay with that. But that's hugely beneficial to a loved one to know that their older sort of family member is being kind of monitored basically by a piece of technology, as opposed to having to have a caregiver there with them.
And this actually probably goes into a whole other topic area, Angela, that I'll just bring up as organic, but given all the newer privacy laws, right, and all these kind of complexities around, well, when is it appropriate use? When is it not appropriate use? Sometimes it's regulatory, sometimes it's company policies. Many times the company's policies are more restrictive than regulatory. We don't want to be perceived as being a bad actor. We don't want to misuse data. And so, even if it's a gray area, we might have a black and white policy. And so now we have to have data governance, right? We can't have people in the organization using data in ways that it shouldn't. And so it's a big problem. When you have big data, there's data everywhere. People have access to data. How do you manage how they're using that data? And someone could take data, use it in a model, inadvertently use data that they really shouldn't be using to make a certain inference. And so now we have a lot more governance than we've ever had. From when we started 20 years ago to now, it was kind of Wild West at some point, and now it's a much more maturing area. And probably next 10 years, it's kind of like managing your energy footprint. I think managing your privacy and your kind of data policies is really a role in the future. There's groups that are now, multiple head count and process and policies. So I think, companies are getting very sophisticated about it. They care about it. They don't want to be misusing the data. And so I think, sometimes it's just, it is very challenging, right? You have so many different people. You're working with an agency, they've got access to certain data, you got internal data, it can commingle. You have to really be very deliberate and make sure that you're anonymizing where you should and using your policies correctly.
So you already started touching on, the changes within this space, particularly policy, regulations. Some of that varies very much even globally then as well. As we look then over time, what are some of the other pieces that come to mind, and particularly implications, both within this space and then also then moving forward?
I don't know who wants to go first on that one, but I think the US, just like the world, is having trouble unifying its viewpoint of sort of the privacy relevancy trade-off, right? You've got states like California that have jumped out and implemented a privacy law that made the internet very clunky, right? All it did was generate these pop-up opt-in windows that most people don't take the time to click through and understand. And so it just kind of it's not the best way to attack the problem. Then you've got Europe out with what's known as GDPR, which is more of a unifying privacy standard. So they're a leader in that sense. And I think the US is trying to tease its way of figuring out where the data ownership belongs. You've got big tech sort of with very large proprietary walled garden data sets. You've got the rest of the internet, trying to walk that fine line of relevancy, especially for advertising and marketing, but also, protecting the privacy of the individual.
Yeah, I think with the advancement of CCPA and GDPR, all of that, that the data ownership is going to go a lot more in the hands of the consumer, more so than in the past, and that consumers will have more knowledge about how their data is being used and what it's being used for, and that more and more there'll be this sort of like value proposition between advertisers and brands and their clients.
I think I'm going to try and tie it to some of the questions that were asked. I think we kind of like alluded to this, but like certain low level, skills and areas, like they become commoditized over time, right? And that's kind of true in every area. Like if you were a web developer 20 years ago, and what made you kind of sort of attractive and special then is not going to do it now. And I would say analytics is absolutely the case, that you really have to understand like what things are really becoming commoditized, like what's becoming automated. Like it used to be that you could just say, hey, I'm someone who kind of knows where the company's data is. I have some SQL skills. I can do some basic visualization, and that's like a valuable job. Like there's not a lot of people that know how to do that. And but then at some point, your organization is going to make a decision like, well, like we're going to put the data into Salesforce and kind of spend some time to organize it, and Salesforce is going to give a bunch of automated reports. And so now we're going to kind of commoditize some of the stuff that maybe was done in a very custom way. And so now, like, what does the role look like? It's not that there's fewer analytics roles, like there's way more need for analytics. But I think this is where you get into like, you have to know how to change the business with analytics, right? So it may be that the marketing roles themselves are way more analytical, and so you want to become a specialist in marketing analytics, or you're a specialist in maybe some more specific area of analytics, or maybe you're specialized in really understanding how you should design reports for for consumption, or whatever area. But it's not enough just to be like, I can throw some visualization out there, I can get access to data. It's really more about becoming relevant in making a business impact. And again, it's not that there aren't specialized techniques. There's always a frontier, like people who know certain advanced machine learning. Yes, like that's obviously very relevant, but like that bar is going to keep raising. And I think it's not necessarily like, it's an ever-going change, but I think the big thing that we have with our team is don't just fall back on the fact that you have some technique that you can do, right? It really is about, how do I package that up to deliver value? Because that's the piece that never goes away. How you do the technique can change. How you deliver value is always needed in the organization.
And so, Louis, there's kind of two threads in the chat questions that you were touching on. One is the career thread. So let's park that one for a second in terms of how do I keep my skills relevant? How do I stay sort of ahead? But there's one that was asked, and then plus one in there about how, sometimes you have these silos. You've got the hardcore sort of data science folks. They might have been math PhDs coming out of programs. And what have you seen, or what have we all seen to make that more successful in terms of integrating it with the business, getting to that level of applied insight that I mentioned and you just mentioned as well? I'll throw it out. For me, what you see in the tech industry that they've done very well is highly matrix teams. So you have these teams formed of, a data science person, you've got a product engineer, and you've got a financially oriented person, all in the same team. They may be direct reporting up through their functional specialists in terms of managing their career development, doing continuing education, sort of care and feeding, how you do employee, their own 360 evaluations, things like that. But when they're actually working, they are judged by their peer group, right? You're judged by how well you're performing within that team. And so I'll throw it out to my fellow panelists. What else have you seen to sort of better integrate those sort of math skills?
Yeah, to add to that, I think like in the way my organization is structured, we have the data science team, the specific audience and insights team, and then a strategic team that takes all of the data and then really provides that roadmap for the clients. But I think what's becoming more important is that everyone is data savvy, that is able to do it, and not just, oh, okay, well, let's only rely on our data insights team for specific items or numbers that we need. It's just everyone needs that basic knowledge now. And even in the future, we're going to see that people really need those tech skills in order to deliver the value, because I think it is enough, it's not enough necessarily to know, the landscape without knowing your consumers and their data.
Yeah, I think some of it, so one is, I think there has to be a right fit, right? So I think sometimes organizations think they need a lot of PhD data scientists. They bring them in and they're like, oh, we really wanted people who could make use of all these tools that have, data-driven analytics as part of it. But we don't necessarily need the PhD data scientist. So I think sometimes you just got to make sure there's a good fit. But if you're an organization that does need that, that data PhD level data science, one of the ways for sure is teaming. Another way is thinking about it as you're delivering products, and the teams that need to consume the output of that data science. A lot of times you can think about it as like, well, we need to take this data science and we need to turn it into an application, right? Or we need to turn it into a product, and then that product needs to integrate in the workflow of our organization. So you're not expecting the business person to kind of interface directly with that PhD data scientist and understand them. But what they can say is, I got this business problem to solve, and I need, a score, or I need an output or an interface that allows me to do certain things. And then the data science is is probably teaming with computer programmers and other folks, but they're ultimately building more of an application or product. And so if you think about like Uber, right? Behind the Uber app, right, is a ton of data science, but we all use it. And I think, in the organization, we see that more and more is, the data scientist is not just delivering data science, right? They're an input into a product or application that then can be consumed. And that's just, like I said, that's true whether you're, building a product for externally facing users or even internally. So more and more we try and deliver that deep insights through something that can actually be consumed in a workflow.
So another example that comes to mind, there's a question in the chat that is seeking to understand how, let's say, that the data piece can be fed into the decision making, whether it be strategically as a whole or even for product innovation. So Louis, you touched on a little bit already, but I'd love to hear, I think Pooja, you had a good example during the prep on how geolocation, just maybe another example for how different kinds of data then help shape the different decisions being made.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. So we have several clients, and when we try to understand what audience is most important, we also want to understand where these audiences are, where they spend their time, especially when serving an ad to them, where in the universe are they? And so we're able to get that mobile location data through partners, through pings like Wi-Fi connection to the internet, and understand. So for example, I was working with a food delivery app service, and we're able to see app usage and where people are converting, and if it's in the suburbs versus the cities, and then how to then better serve customers as a result of that, and where to place advertisements to better reach the audience.
Yeah, and like you're going to have different kinds of data for different kind of problems, and this goes back to like both the specialization of people and skills, and and the data, but like sometimes you're trying to solve a problem of you're trying to do some sort of interpretation, right? Like you're trying to understand like natural language, right? Someone's trying to communicate, and I'm trying to interpret like what is it that they want, right? What are they saying? Sometimes you might try and interpret an image, right? And so there's lots of different data science that sort of specialize in those different areas of like, how do I understand the information that's being conveyed, right? Then you have really another area that my team does a lot of, which is really trying to predict behavior, right? And so we're trying to predict like, well, here's all the information we know about, kind of what's happened in the past, and then sort of predictors and outcomes, and then now we try and going forward to figure out what's going to happen. And so there's another different kinds of data you want to do to make predictions than you want to do when you're doing classification problems and images. And then when you're trying to automate decisions, right, you're trying to say, oh, we've got these predictions, but now how do we figure out how to make recommendations? And you have a whole kind of class around recommendation engines. So I think like each problem area has its own kind of different data, and like trying to predict, where or understand where someone is, right, with geolocation, right? It's again a very specialized problem. And so in general, I think you either are having specialized people solve that problem, or you're essentially renting that capability, right, through some service, bureau, or application, right? So like geolocation, my guess is you guys aren't, I mean, I'm guessing or whatever, but you're probably not doing a ton of like, we built the geolocation capability, but you're using geolocation that some other technology firm has created for you to use.
And I think, it looked like the question was kind of oriented at lots of confirming evidence is looked for, but when do you look for consumer data that might be disconfirming to your strategy? And it's a more sort of applied use of that is consumer A/B science testing in general, right? I mean, most tech companies have honed the ability to implement small micro product changes, and they actually look to behavioral use to dictate where the company goes with that, right? Which one's going to win. And generally, they don't have a hypothesis of sometimes of which one's going to win, because it can be counterintuitive as to where things go. And another use of sort of disconfirming maybe at the micro level is really customer service sentiment data, right? Whether that's on a social graph or direct, in terms of direct customer service feedback, you can often get signals that you've got a problem in your area by sifting through some of those. Sometimes you listen to your human customer service reps. Sometimes you're getting a graph of either social sentiment or direct contact data. But if you put all three of those together, you usually can get a pretty good image of where you might have some problem areas, in terms of your product.
All right, good. I think we're getting to the end of our time where we open it up more broadly for Q&A. So would want to just invite the three of you to share any final thoughts, whether that be looking forward at the future, how you see this space evolving, or some thoughts on challenges and watchouts as folks continue to evolve in this space.
I'll just go quickly. It's a growing space. It's critical, for almost every area. We largely represent businesses, but it's in nonprofits, it's in kind of every area. So I'd say using data to make better decisions is never going away. How that gets done and kind of what are all the different roles and stuff like that will definitely evolve over time. But if you are interested in this space and not already in, or if you're looking to grow into it, I definitely think it's a great space to be in from a growth and sort of investment perspective. And certainly it just has tentacles into so many different places. So definitely just, perspective on the industry is definitely hugely positive from that perspective. And I'll pass it off to the rest to fill in other details.
Yeah, I mean, every industry needs consumer insights. I think that's the main takeaway. All of us on the panels come from different backgrounds, and I think, having that sort of industry agnostic background with consumer insights is what makes it so challenging and interesting. Is that there's so many opportunities for it, and so again, it's a growing field, and there's a lot of opportunity, which is why I, in my career, decided to make that shift into the field.
I guess for me, I look forward to the continued evolution of the use of data. I saw that Ken and Lolly put in here. I think he or she was the gentleman that or the person that was concerned about opt-in because they're concerned about a company using their data without their consent. And I think you have to really think about, well, there's tons of products that are provided on the internet for essentially free. They're advertising supported. And so, yes, there's a class of consumer that doesn't really want their data used in a certain way, and they'd be willing to pay a premium for the use of that service or not, right? Some services would disappear because once you put up a paywall, they're not there. I mean, I think our news media had a very difficult transition, to paid services, basically, because there was commoditized free news, basically, if you just search for it on Google. And so I think, we'll continue to evolve the comfort level of the use of that data in return for provision of products, and also in return for, advertising's kind of gotten a dirty sort of name because of selling of third-party data, but it serves an essential service in terms of marketing and making people aware of new products and new businesses. Highly relevant, programmatic, and targeted advertising can actually be less of a nuisance than untargeted advertising, as I'm sure Pooja, who works at an ad agency, would argue. And so for me, I look forward to kind of society's continued refinement of making it a little bit, the internet a safer place, leaning towards a little bit more opt-in so people understand the use of their data. And I think we'll kind of shake out where individuals and groups of people are comfortable with that and not comfortable with that. And I think it differs by culture, by age, and so forth.
Great. Thank you all so much for sharing thus far. And then I'm going to hand it over now, I believe, to Eric, who will open it up for Q&A.
Yeah, I'll just mention, I saw the comment by Ken and Lolly there, and I think the customized billboard would be great on the family road trips with knowing how far it is to the next Chick-fil-A. So without checking the phone.
I like that. I have to bring that back to my team.
That's it. So we've talked about strategy in a number of questions, and just want to hit on this one to begin. How do you balance the tension between speed and noise that comes with more data and insights that we're getting now with the need for a more unified kind of longer term strategy?
Well, I think that's the management team's job, right, of a company, right, in terms of making sure you don't get distracted with things that aren't really insight. There's tons of data. It's the job of the analyst or the manager or the strategist to kind of tease out what is a real insight. And so, I think techniques and tactics like making sure you have time in your schedule that is dedicated to kind of reprioritizing and thinking is a good one. That's kind of a personal career piece, but that's one that's useful to kind of tamp down the noise.
I really agree with that. We have so much data, and half, if not more than half, of our job is to understand, well, what is actually pertinent to us in the story that we're trying to tell about our consumers. There is so much noise. And so that is, I feel like, one of the roles and responsibilities is to understand, well, what will bring value and actually is relevant, and what data is not so necessarily important that can be put to the side for later use. So overall, just really understanding what's pertinent and what's not.
I think there's two practical things I've seen that have become, pretty critical given like the huge volumes of data and the potential, right, for you to make decisions based on noise. One is that more and more, I think there's expectation that, you're not just like doing some study and producing a one-time result and then saying, okay, that insight now lives for a long period of time. In most cases, people want to see that insight put into some production state where you can continually refresh it and you can continue to monitor it and make sure it's still true, right? Because, you might say, oh, that was true for like 6 weeks and then it's not true anymore. And we've been running a whole business on that insight for the last 2 years. So there's a lot more, I think, expectation that everything kind of be automated, refreshed, and always available. I mean, the amount of time we've been asked to like just do something, create a PowerPoint, and you're done with it is now pretty limited. It's almost everything has to live on in some way. Mostly, I think, just to continue to validate the insight's still there. And the other thing that is really important is, in the past, it used to kind of have, well, BI would work with very kind of small set of curated data. Data scientists work with, the massive amounts of data, and there's kind of nothing in the middle. And I think more and more what you see is organizations really having to curate, to eliminate some of the noise, to create assets that kind of live in that middle layer, like having people that take messy data and turn it into cleaner data so that downstream other people can use that data becomes really critical. So if you have a learning organization, I mean, on Netflix, my guess is they do this, tremendously well. Like they don't just say, here's a bunch of raw data, everybody, have at it. It's like, look, we've got raw data if you need that, but we've got like different layers where people have curated at different levels, and that makes it less likely that you're going to base something on noise, because you have a person who's gone through and essentially attempted to clean out as much noise as they can.
I think another tactic along those lines is, we live with dashboards and metrics everywhere these days because of the proliferation of data. So whoever manages your dashboard or your metric pack, has to have a dedicated reduction of 10 to 20% every year, because the tendency is to stack onto it. And so, much like a sort of a government regulations, you kind of have to have a directed and deliberate effort to reduce it. Otherwise, it just grows. Maybe I threw a political comment in there, but in terms of metrics packs, it's definitely, humans get overwhelmed, right? There's all this psych research that humans can keep 3 to 7 things in their head at a time. So why are you giving them 100 metrics?
Ultimately, if I can add in, if we think about our business objective, what is that? And then what the good old saying, what gets measured gets done, right? And making sure that you're focused on what it is that you're ultimately aspiring towards, and the metrics, both leading and lagging, are set up accordingly. And to Lewis's term on learning organization, it's then making sure that we're measuring those metrics that tied to that business objective, and there's accountability and ownership then across the different teams in a coordinated fashion, of course, all contributing to that overall set of metrics.
So kind of going on the continual data around a specific decision, the question came in, and y'all touched on a little bit of poking holes in an approach. They said, we know data can inform a path forward, but when and how is it used to validate that path?
I guess I'd say, like, there's different stages that you're doing different kinds of validation. So like, I would say early on, if someone has a hypothesis, like you're kind of using analysis to say, can we kind of find organically whether this hypothesis is supported in our history, right? And so you're trying to figure out, like, if you want to say, hey, is something potentially causing churn? Well, let me go see in the data if we can kind of spot that pattern, and then let me figure out if I can control for other factors. So you do that, and let's say you're like, oh, okay, well, we validated that we see something in the data that makes us think that's real. And then you may do some kind of sizing of it to say, okay, well, if we wanted to go tackle it, what kind of size would that be? So now you got to kind of do a sizing estimation. And then let's say you're like, okay, yep, we want to do that. Now what treatments would we now go to prevent churn? Then you'd have to do an exercise to really try and dig into what things do we see that maybe help from a mitigation perspective. So when you combine that trigger with these certain outcomes or these certain actions that we end up not churning. So that's another analysis. And then let's say, okay, everything looks good. Let's set up a test. So then you set up a test. You do that treatment. Now you're getting actual sort of test control data. Now you're doing another analysis to sort of ultimately determine if that path forward makes sense. And then finally, based on that, if you say, look, everything looks good, we see it in the test, now we want to scale it up and do it in a big way, then obviously go forward. So I'd say there's definitely analysis that's done all along that way to make sure that the decisions you're making kind of make sense. And that's different, distinct from what David was saying is a lot of times you had to do the analysis in the first place, even come up with a hypothesis, right? Like comb the data to basically find ideas. And that's a whole different set of analysis, even before you have a hypothesis.
I think there's a meta topic here that shifted over the last, say, 10 to 20 years that, a lot of companies would look to passive customer service data coming into them to kind of sift for problems. Now, what you want to do is you want to constantly monitor active data, like actual use data, behavioral data, and then and look for anomalies within that. That generally will be more of a leading indicator of problems in your business than the passive, customer service data coming in. I mean, Netflix would constantly monitor. An example of this would be, if lots of people are watching a piece of content and then all of a sudden at 15 minutes in, tons of people didn't watch it, that's usually an indicator there was an encoding issue, there was a subtitling issue, something was wrong in the actual sort of product, then just people chose to bail out at 15 minutes in. So that's a practical example where you're using, monitoring data. And this is where this goes back to the theme of, is it creepy? Is it not? Is it in the best interest of the individual and the consumer or the company? I think most people would lean in a little bit. Sometimes it can feel a little creepy. What if your recommendation suddenly got really accurate when you're on the treadmill at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday morning? They were very different than when you were sitting down with your family at not at 8 p.m. on a Friday, right? That's an example of data that can start to feel a little creepy, but is actually in your benefit.
Well, I think, David, I'm thinking of my personal Netflix experience. I'm going in and I'm liking and disliking content and shows that, that I prefer and I don't prefer. And I think that speaks to, moving towards that first party landscape.
David, one point in that I think is also important is a lot of times there's like different ways of achieving the same result. So like what I would call kind of the CRM way is, you're trying to take like information the customer's providing you, like they're calling in, they're giving you preferences, right? And you're trying to manage those cases and manage that relationship. And there's a lot of reasons why you want to do that. And then you have this analytics way, right, which is like sifting through data and finding patterns and saying, hey, we think this customer has an issue, even though they haven't told us they have an issue. And then you got to bring those worlds together. And what I found is if you keep them too siloed, right, they end up conflicting. And I think there's a best of both worlds you can get in. Like customers probably don't like it. If you treat them like for example, if we think a customer has a problem and they call into the IVR to talk to us, and we're like, oh, we already know what your problem is. You can't talk to anybody because we've already know what your problem is. And that customer is calling really to talk about a different problem or something else, right? We've created a problem because we're not listening to the customer. We're trying to tell the customer what we saw. If you bring those two together, I think you have the right balance. You want to do a bit of both and bring it together. I think the best organizations figure out how to fit that kind of CRM side with the analytics side.
I think you're right. You have to have integrated customer service and product engineering, right? They have to be very close to each other. And you also, I think it's the best companies respect the modality of the customer, in terms of how they want to interact. Like if you have an older customer that might be less comfortable with those sort of deep monitoring things, it's useful to know that, and maybe they just want a human touch in there.
Great. So we've hit on it a few times, and this may be the last one we get to around privacy. And this one was kind of asked specifically for you, Louis. I think it was with the legislation that's come through, GDPR, and things of changing how data is collected and used. Is there anything specific kind of business-wise that y'all have had to work through that's affected it? Business practices, customer interactions?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, so like I said, all the privacy kind of regulations and rules, I mean, so they're going to provide some specific criteria, like you have to catalog data at a certain level. You have to be able to, someone makes a request, you have to be able to respond to that request and give them certain information that you collect on them. And if they want to opt out, you have to support certain things. So it's basically forced you to build certain capabilities in your organization to support those requirements. And then we as an organization have to decide, well, maybe we think that's a good policy in general, right? Maybe that should be across everybody, or maybe we think our policy should be some hybrid approach. And so we've spent a lot of time, not just to, we have to build those capabilities to support the regulatory side, but we're also now having conversations we've never had before at the company, which is like, what do we want our strategy to be, right? Like, what do we want to be as a company, and how does it align with our overall kind of brand and who we want to be as a company? So I think that's become critical, and I think a good company is like, if you look at Apple, right? Like they've seen where privacy is going, and they look at their brand and who Apple is, and they've tried to figure out a way to make privacy kind of core to their brand and be very aligned. And I think the better organizations are certainly going to be doing those things, and we certainly have at Cox. I'd say in general, we take a very I'd say we definitely want to be very strong on the privacy perspective. So we sell very little data. We're very, very careful about how we use the data. And I would say we stay out of any gray area. Like, we're not just complying is one thing. I think it's really complying with the spirit of it is really what we're trying to embrace as a company.
I have a few clients who are very concerned about a potential drop-off rate in the number of consumers that we're able to understand from. But I think ultimately these regulations are going to force alternative avenues of where we get our data, and make it more of a better experience for both the companies and as well as the people who are using it.
I think, it might be an uncomfortable answer to hear for some folks, but the genie's out of the bottle in terms of you don't really need opt-in data to kind of target your advertising, right? If somebody is participating in our digital economy, there's so many passive signals that you can pick up. You'd rather have first-party information like an email or an ID indicator. And there's this great debate around third-party cookies versus first-party ID indicators, but generally the companies that are leading that debate are self-serving in the sense that they're already established walled garden companies that have strong ID indicators, like a Gmail, for instance. And so I think where we're headed is better and more clear and more transparency around opt-out, opt-in. I think we're headed to, I think more and more, the younger you are, the more that you just embrace the fact that you're living in a digital world, and that you're pretty able to identify, and some of it's creepy, and let's wall off those areas that are real creepy and not good uses, and let's leave open the possibility for all the benefits that the other areas brought. And I use an example of tracking a loved one, who may be elderly and have health problems. That's a good thing. And so I think that, we'll continue. I don't think we should let the large companies self-regulate. So I'm not advocating that at all. But I am a little scared that our own legislators are not the most tech forward sometimes. I think there's a lot of education that needs to happen in DC to really understand how targeted advertising works, how you build data sets, and so forth. So I think that they need to continue to educate themselves and their legislative staff.
We are at the end of the hour, but I want to hit a lightning quick answer. Jennifer shared something about being a nonprofit leader, and I think it would be great to just share what they're doing. So she said, as a nonprofit leader working to get on board and really manage data analytics, do you have a few insights for building toward more sophisticated insights on a budget? So just we'll go real quick around.
I would say it's funny is keep it simple, like keep the moving pieces as small as possible, right? So the more you can be, in the same environment, keep things consistent, and then you can kind of move your analytics much faster if you're just not changing all the data and other components of your ecosystem.
Yeah, I would say really define what metrics matter to you and then find the tools and systems that will most appropriately answer those questions for you.
And two practical for me. One would be, it depends on the type of person you are. If you're like the, do-it-yourself type, find a continuing ed program that covers, sort of introduction to data technology, that sort of thing. And then you can figure out if you want to build from there. Or if you're not that do-it-yourself person, go find an intern in a data science program. They're often looking for projects. They're often looking for theses, and so they'd be love to help out a nonprofit.
Angela, do you have anything to send us off?
Well, my final thought is just in general, I think it's, it just starts with listening and knowing what it is that you're looking for, the territory. And then from there, you continue to build. I think with all the tools, the capabilities and things that the panelists have all mentioned, you start with the core, and then from there, it can enrich from there.
Well, this has been great. I've enjoyed it, and I'm sure everyone that's joined in has as well. And so again, I've said it a number of times, but again, just special thank you to you, Pooja, Angela, David, and Louis. Thank you for your time and insight today.